Thank you all. Good evening to all, and I hope you're all doing very, very well considering everything that's going on around us. This is the first for us, franchising in the current economic climate. We know that individuals like your good selves are looking for options. Franchising is a very credible route. We've assembled an all-star cast here, an incredibly knowledgeable panel with a wealth of industry knowledge, experts in their own fields. And so before we do anything else, let's get you acquainted with our panel. Ben from Agency Express, tell us a little bit about you, your journey and your experience in franchising.
Thanks, Salim. I think Bal's actually first, but that's okay. I don't mind being alphabetically brought forward. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Brookes. I'm the Managing Director of Agency Express, the UK's only nationwide for sale board service. So what we do is we put up boards for estate agents. So the temporary signage that's outside properties up and down the country. The boards you see outside of those houses are erected by third-party contractors. Those third-party contractors, around 50% of all of those boards that go up are put up by my franchisees. That equates to around 120, 125,000 property visits across the UK every single month. And each time we visit a property, we raise a charge to the estate agent that we're servicing, and that's how we make our money. I've successfully helped over 100 franchisees to join the Agency Express network. Some of those were what we call greenfield franchisees, so franchisees who start with zero business and build their business from scratch. And some of those were resale franchisees who purchased an existing franchise from a successful franchisee and carried on building and growing that business. The current environment that we're seeing is, although testing for every business, the financial side of it we've seen before. So again, we're well versed to answer your questions you've got on that.
Bal, same question to yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good evening, everybody, and I hope everybody's keeping safe and well in this current situation. I'll just give you a snapshot of HSBC and franchising and our involvement in the industry, and then a bit about myself, what I do. So the franchise unit has been established for over 30 years. We are a specialist franchise team with a wealth of knowledge and experience in franchising and commercial lending. We deal with both national and international franchise brands. We have recently replicated and set up the franchise teams in a further 10 countries. This gives us great comfort to work with brands and support brands from overseas into the UK and vice versa. So throughout the year, we run over 90 events supporting our customers become multi-unit and multi-brand operators. So just to give you an idea, in the last 10 years, or 10 years ago, I would say, we wrote about £15 million worth of business solely in franchising. And only last year, we touched almost £500 million. That clearly shows how the franchise industry is growing year on year. In the UK, there are about 900 franchise brands, and we work very closely with about a third of those. Our role is to build good relationships with the franchisors like Ben and Pitman, and when we build those relationships with those franchisors, we have a good understanding of the model itself, so we can then tailor a package for their franchisees to suit their needs. Further information you can actually lift from our HSBC website, so we have got our franchise guides that are available for you to download. I'm the main point of contact in the franchise team. Once you are ready to discuss your business needs, what we will need to see is a business plan and a cash flow and perhaps an assets and liability statement depending on the level of funding you're looking for. I will then review that and make sure that it all stacks up subject to the lending and your commitment and the security that's available. We have dedicated franchise relationship managers that will work with you to support your borrowings in detail. Our business managers can do lending up to £300,000 over the phone. So there's no need for you to walk into the branch. Everything is done electronically and over the phone. If you're looking for beyond £300,000, then it will be a face-to-face relationship manager, but again, it will be dedicated franchise managers. The whole process can take up to about 8 weeks, just to give you a snapshot of that. At the moment, our main focus is supporting customers through the COVID situation. So already we've had over 120,000 applications, and they're still coming through thick and fast. So just to round that off, I would say that we're almost seen as an advisory consultancy unit, helping people set up to be successful.
Matt, over to yourself. Tell us a little bit about your extraordinary journey through franchising.
Okay, so I've been in franchising now for over 21 years. I started a business with a colleague of mine called Snack in the Box, and we grew that to 125 franchisees. So we were a snack delivery business in association with Cadbury. So Cadbury gave us their corporate image, but it was totally and purely our business. And so we built that much the same as a man and van type franchise at the time, vending chocolate and all kinds of things like that. So what we found over the years, we sold 125 franchise territories, but like Ben was explaining earlier on, you do get resales. So probably, double that amount or maybe a little bit more over that 20 odd years. And then I sold that business in 2009, stayed on for a year to run it. And then I joined a company called Expense Reduction Analysts, who are a white collar franchise, and headed up their franchise recruitment for the UK for 9 years. And around about last summer, I was thinking to myself, I'd like to work for myself again. And so I left ERA and I set up Franchise Advisory Services Limited, which is a consultancy to help establish franchisors with their recruitment strategy and that kind of thing, but also to help people that are very new to franchising. So perhaps they don't know anything about franchise and how to choose the right franchise and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Nikki.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicola Hoskin, who works. I work currently for Pitman Training and School is Easy. I head up the franchise development division across the UK and also globally. I also have quite a long background in franchising. I've worked within different industries. So fashion retail was my initial foray into the franchising world. I work for a number of big brands, including Arcadia, Marks and Spencer's, Gap, Banana Republic, globally franchising and setting up or expanding the big box brands into international markets. So I have also worked as part of franchisees for a long time in international and domestic markets, and obviously also within the franchisor operations. So again, a good understanding of both sort of sides of the coin. So again, about a 15-year history in franchising, a pure love of franchising. I think it's an excellent way of expanding a business and taking a brand into new territories and into new markets. I love working with and meeting new people and taking a brand and growing it and enjoying the success through working as a partnership with a franchisee. So yeah, a huge kind of love for the industry that I'm in. So Pitman Training and School is Easy, a little bit different to the fashion brands. So training and tutoring. Pitman Training, you may, I'm sure, be aware of. It's a brand that's been around for a very long time. We have our sort of origins with Sir Isaac Pitman, who created shorthand back in 1837, and we have evolved through being kind of a secretarial college and sort of varying forms to being the leading adult vocational training provider worldwide. We have 90 operations around the world, including international territories such as Russia, Pakistan, Kenya, and lots of interest globally. We are an experienced franchisor. We have been franchising for over 40 years. So a lot of expertise and a lot of knowledge, I guess, and learnings into what makes a successful Pitman franchise. Our products range from diplomas right through to short courses covering subjects such as accountancy, marketing, secretarial, business management, essentially job skills, taking a student or taking somebody who is either dissatisfied rather in their current role, or looking for a switch of career, or perhaps a returning mum to the workforce, and really planning their career, really understanding their career aspirations and planning their learning journey to enable them to get that job or to get that promotion that they want. The second brand is School is Easy. So this is a North American home-based school-age tutoring business. It has been going since 2002, but it's new to launch in the UK. So both brands are part of Launch Life, which is our parent company. Both brands exist within their portfolio of businesses. School is Easy is a low-cost, very quick to set up tutoring business. It has 3 means of tutoring. So in-home, whereas a tutor would visit a family to tutor, online, and also on demand via the app, which no other tutoring business has such technology as we do. So again, both businesses are completely robust, brilliantly positioned, as I said, in the current climate to reach our either desperate families who are struggling with children at home and not able to support them, or people concerned about their job, or just maybe wanting a change in their career when they eventually get back to work again.
That's great.
Nice to be here. Thanks everyone.
Thank you for being on board. Thank you, Nikki. Let's jump straight into the questions that we've had from the audience already. Then is now a good time to buy a franchise, and why?
Is now a good time to buy a franchise? Well, certainly to research the franchise, it is a good time to research. There is obviously, because of the COVID situation, we don't expect that to last, but certainly look at the franchise that you're looking to enter into and make sure it's not because of the situation itself. You don't want to delve into a brand where you kind of think, oh, this is doing really well in this current climate. This current climate isn't going to be here forever. So always think about it. We do have in our franchise guide, there are some typical questions that you can be asking the franchisor before you commit, and you've got to go into a franchise that you're going to enjoy. So don't again rush into any franchise just because of the money. Don't chase the money. You've got to chase your dream as well. So that's what I would say.
Excellent. Ben, your thoughts on timing, whether now is a good time to buy a franchise?
Yeah, sure. I don't think there's ever a good time to buy a franchise. I don't think that's the way you should look at it. When me and Matt used to do the seminars in person back in the day, we always used to say that there's no business opportunities out there that's so good that you should feel under pressure to make a decision upon it. In the position, the charmed position a lot of people find themselves in at the moment is they've got a lot of time, because we found that all the leisure activities that we would normally be spending our time on aren't there and available for us. We can spend that time wisely elsewhere. And I think Bal hit the nail on the head that it's a great time to be researching what's right for you and looking into everything that franchising has to offer. And it really does cover every business sector from £2-3 million investments into hotels down to man and van franchises like Agency Express and everything in between. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other, or one has to happen quicker than the other, or that now is the right time for one or the other. But what it means is you can take the time that you have available to you now to look into everything and then decide what's a good fit for you. Once you've done that, and once you've decided what fits for you, then you look at the financial position and what you can afford. Once you've understood the financial position and what you can afford, I'm probably stealing Matt's thunder here and he's going to kill me for it, but you then have the important conversation with yourself, don't you, Matt, in front of the mirror? And you do. And you ask yourself the questions that and you try and be honest with yourself about the realities of what you can and can't do. I'll paraphrase and give one great example. When we do franchise, you'll know we get lots and lots of different people come and see us on the stand. And I had a guy who came up to me on the stand and told me that he had the greatest. So he said, I'm going to make millions. It's brilliant. I've been to see them. They're fantastic. I'm going to make a fortune. I said, that's great. What is it? What are you going to be doing? He said, it doesn't matter, because there's so much money. It doesn't matter. And I said, no, come on, tell me, what is it? And he said, it's Dynarod. I said, that's great, but you've got to shove your hand down the toilet. And he said, yeah, I don't really want to do that. And it's true. You don't necessarily want to do certain activities. I'm pretty good with talking to people. I'm not so good with my hands. So I wouldn't do something that was physical and practical, but something that was more set to my skills, I would consider irrelevant of the market trading conditions, because I know I can make that a success. So it's more about what works for you, I think.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Yep.
Definitely.
That's Matt, what could you add to that?
Well, I would say I've spoken to lots of different brands, and we are definitely going through unusual times for sure. You know, while some franchisors are really suffering at the moment, other franchisors are adapting their model and evolving with the situation to be able to survive. And some sectors are absolutely flat out. You know, if you look at domiciliary home care, contract cleaning, there's not enough hours in the day, there's not enough days in the week for them to keep up with the demand. What I would say is, what's interesting about this COVID-19 situation, it's a really good measuring stick, because it will help you see how resilient a franchise model can be in these difficult circumstances. And you will also see some really good evidence of how the franchisor, which is the owner of the business model, has demonstrated their commitment to you if you're the franchisee, and just how much they bend over backwards to help you and support the network. And I think as time moves on, this will be one of the metrics that people will measure the quality of the franchise model and the franchisor, by seeing that, well, the model was robust and they really did support their franchise network during the pandemic.
Thanks for that, Matt. And Nikki, your take on current timing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can add anything. I think the guys have covered everything, but I think, yeah, ultimately it depends on what franchise you are looking at or what business you're looking at. But also, I do fully agree. It has to be something that you feel passionate about, and you know, whether we're irrespective of the time of year. So yeah, I think do your research. It is a great time now to you know, have a look around, but really get interested in something that really interests you and is, you know, you're going to be passionate about. So yeah. Excellent.
Thanks, Nikki. Now we've got two current franchisors in the house. That's Nikki and Ben. So this is a question relating to a point that Matt raised. What has your network done to help franchisees during the current crisis? So if we start with Nikki on that one.
Okay, so fortunately we are able to be flexible with our businesses, and I guess the most important thing is to make sure our franchisees are safe and their staff, etc., are safe. So very much following the guidance provided and continually following the guidance. So you know, as I said, we have 90 operations for Pitman across the world. So, you know, making sure that our teams are working from home, not traveling into locations, etc. We are continuing to communicate very, very regularly. We already have sort of weekly webinars across all of our franchisees, sharing ideas and just kind of understanding situations. All of our students, our current students, are able to continue to study. So obviously making sure that our students are continuing their progress, and our course advisors and our learning coaches are connecting with those students via Zoom, via all the means of, you know, the communications that are out there. So actually it's been really, we've adapted our model. So obviously the students are not coming into centres, but you know, there is no halt on anybody's learning.
Excellent. Another string to your bow, it seems. And Ben, Agency Express's experience.
In terms of what we've done for our franchisees and how we've worked with them, it's the same point that I come back to and I roll back round always with franchising, which is about communication. A franchise relationship between a franchisor and a franchisee is like a marriage. It's not about power and it's not about control. It's about shared responsibility and about the franchisee and the franchisor working together. It's a symbiotic relationship. They have to work together. So the first thing we encourage all of our franchisees to do from the start is to communicate. So what we did when the pandemic really caught hold, first thing we did was stop servicing. That was a huge decision for me to make. It was literally a case of tasking my team with ringing all of our franchisees and saying, great news guys, you've got to stop working. The driving force behind that wasn't the government direction, but it was about safety. So the first thing we need to put in front of anything else, in front of earnings, in front of business growth, is safety. So we stopped the guys from servicing. Then we started the communication and ramped it up beyond what we'd normally do. So we're running, just as Nikki is as well, weekly webinars with our franchisees, and we've gone back to square one and we've started retraining them. So we've broken our standard franchise training course down into chunks that they can absorb in short periods of time, and we're literally training them with the basics. Now, they can dip in and out of that as much as they want, but it means that they're still learning. And of course, things change all the time, and we all develop bad habits. I'm sure if we all went back to a driving instructor, we'd all learn lots of things we're doing wrong. Perhaps not usefully, but everyone else we'd all learn lots of things we're doing wrong. And it's a great way to re-engage with the franchisees and have the opportunity to talk to them. And at the end of each session, we have a Q&A session with them where they can ask questions with their peers and know that they're in a safe environment to talk about them. So there's no rules around that. They can ask me whatever they like. If it's a very uncomfortable question, that's fine. I'll take it and we'll move on. That was the first thing we did. The second thing we did was got messages out to all of the customers to make sure they understood where we were. With any environment, I think it's, again, about communication with whoever you're working with. So the clients need to know what's going on as well as the franchisees. And we've kept them all updated throughout the process. I've then turned my role from being someone who runs a business into someone who deciphers government directives and accountancy practices and help the franchisees to break down into layman's terms what each of the schemes that are available to them to support their business are, which ones I think are relevant to them. And with the nature of how we work, some of our franchisees are limited companies and some of them are sole traders. So different things apply to different people. And then with those franchisees who perhaps had less support available to them, the first thing we did was look at how we could support them financially and make sure that in 3 months, 6 months, a year's time, we're stronger than we were before. But having that franchisor behind you means that that communication continues to happen. So what you're looking for is reassurance. Reassurance that I know what I'm talking about and that I understand the industry that we work in because I've been here before. And we saw the financial crisis in 2008 and we saw the recession in 2003 and we saw how that affected the worlds that we work in. And those franchise businesses and those franchise professionals, like all these guys who have been around for that length of time, have seen this all before. It's not new.
I like the analogy of the family aspect of franchising. We've got another question. This is for the entire panel. This is a short question. How easy is it to buy a franchise?
Well, if you come across an unscrupulous franchisor, it's very easy. If you come across somebody, you've got the cash, a fool and his money are easily parted. But if you come across a really proper professional system, it's a two-way conversation. The franchisor is looking to find the best quality franchisee they possibly can. And so one of the things I used to look for all the time wasn't necessarily did they have the skills, because the franchisor should be able to train the franchisee to give them all the skills to make them successful. Things you can't give people is enthusiasm, motivation, dependability, and being able to work together. They've either got those things or they haven't. So I used to look for those things because I knew I could train the other things to them. So it's a process you go through. It's a due diligence process where you have to find out. It's going back to the marriage analogy. It's like the dating scenario and the engagement, the wedding, and you have to kind of get all those things right before you actually sign the franchise agreement.
Val, would you care to add an analogy into that as well?
Well, again, I would say that, it is a two-way street. The franchisor has got to be comfortable with the franchisee and vice versa as well. So, and in terms of supporting that franchise, again, even if that franchisee was to come to us for the support with the funding, again, we need to be comfortable to know that that individual is going to be right for that brand, not only for the brand itself, because sometimes we kind of come across individuals and they may have been accepted or at least started the journey with the franchisor, and we see a different side to that individual, you see. So it's almost like they want to portray themselves as the perfect candidate for the franchisor, but when it comes to us, we need to see that they actually can manage themselves, they can manage their finances as well. Hence the reason why we would then ask them to, for their plans, etc., just to evaluate them.
Is there a good sector to invest in during a pandemic?
At the moment, the resilient ones are definitely the domiciliary care. they seem to be doing extremely, but then again, that's expected simply because of the situation it is. Is that the right reason to invest in that particular business? I don't think so, unless they are actually cut out for that kind of work. There's, you know, they've got to be hands-on to take on business. So they've got to be, as Ben suggested previously, they've got to be the right people. They've got to be cut out to do the hard work. It's almost like saying, you know, it's not a pet for Christmas, it's going to be for life, really. In a sense, you know, you've got it for about 5 years, which is the term of the agreement traditionally that you'd be tied into. And, you know, 5 years is a long time. But then again, in 5 years, you're almost just about getting used to the business itself. So that's just kind of the longevity that you've got to think about before you actually enter into any business. So I think there's a lot of things to consider first before you actually think about, is this, you know, just because domiciliary care is doing so well, I should go into that, or a man in a van is doing because of, you know, or gardening, because again, gardening, they're not restricted as such. They're outside in the open air, so they can continue trading. But lots of things to consider before you do.
Good stuff. Thank you. Matt, what's your take on that?
Bit of a shameless self-promotion for a second. It's one of the things I talk about in the franchise seminars, because there's 950 brands available in the UK, or 953 actually. And how can you choose from that to the one that's right for you? Well, you have to go through a number of steps to be able to do that. So first one is, does it suit you and your circumstances? Well, first one is, can you afford it, first of all? Because that will, you know, choose the right level of investment for you. Then you have to think about, is it right for me? Is it the kind, you know, if you can't get out of bed in the mornings, don't buy a bakery franchise. You've got to be there at 2:30. You know, there's that kind of question, isn't it? You've got to ask yourself. And then you go through a number of steps until eventually you narrow it down to about 5 or 10 brands that you really think you could be suited to, and they might be interested in you. And then you have to go and see them, don't you? And visit the franchisor, if, well, Zoom them these days at this minute in time. But you do need to find out, is there an affinity? Do you get on with the franchisor? There's no point investing your money in a business system with someone you don't get on with even before you've even signed a franchise agreement.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Now, many of our buyers are wondering whether they should buy a non-franchise business, sort of going concern, or a franchise. So business versus franchise. What are your thoughts, Ben, on that?
Business versus franchise. Wow. I think it all depends on the individual and what their history is, their previous experience of working in business and the sector that they're looking at. With the people that come to me, the vast majority of people that look at franchising either come from a simple self-employed background, and again, that's not being derogatory, but perhaps they've come from a trade, or they've come from a contracting perspective, so maybe they've worked in a singular industry and they've contracted privately, or they come from an employed background, so they come from having a standard employed job and they decide that they want to be self-employed. And those reasons tend to be very simple to nail down as to why someone wants to be self-employed. They've either reached the limit of what they can achieve in their industry, so there's a glass ceiling with any job, and when you get to that point you simply can't progress, and that can be deeply frustrating if you've got more skill and more talent to apply, but there's nowhere further for you to go. They hate what they do. That's the second most common one. So they're good at their job, but the environment isn't what they enjoy. And then the last one is that they know they've got the skill and the talent to be self-employed, but they don't know what they want to do with it. So going into franchising means that someone is going to hold your hand through the process of being self-employed. It's a lot of the little things that people don't think about with self-employment. Things like filing taxes and VAT returns are the obvious things, you know, the things that people think, well, you know, I'll get an accountant, they'll help me with that, and they can solve that problem for me. But it's the smaller stuff. You know, what happens if you've got an appointment with a client and you're sick? What do you do then? You know, that's the kind of thing a franchisor is going to be able to say, well, we've been through that problem before. This is what we did, and this is what solved the problem. So it's having an idiot's guide to how to run your business and to get the answers right the first time. We've made all the mistakes for you in the past, so you don't have to make them in the future. And because we've made all those mistakes for you, it's a damn sight easier to get the business from day 1 to day 90 and be making profit, rather than starting on day 1 and still floundering trying to work out which wholesaler you've got to buy goods from on day 90 and pulling your hair out? It's a question I get asked a lot at exhibitions. Always seems to be exhibitions when these come up. Well, why do I could just do this myself? I'll just go and set up stuff. Yeah, go for it. Absolutely. And if that's the approach and the mindset that you have, fill your boots. Because you will be calling me in 6-12 months' time and saying, oh my God, I really wish I'd picked up the phone and spoken to you. I don't know what to do about this. I've got a liability claim and I don't know how to deal with it. I've gone through a gas main. What do I do about that? And we've had all those problems before and dealt with them, and we know the appropriate way to deal with the client. That's the first thing. We could wax lyrical about this for forever and a day. But the only other big point I'd pick up on is franchisors, the majority of you will have access to things the standalone business doesn't. So it may be systems. So with Agency Express, we've spent £2 million on our internal system. You can't do that if you're a standalone business. You just don't have the funds for it. Equally, it might be buying power. So with Agency Express, we don't buy a huge amount of stuff. We're a service, not a product supplier. But with Matt's previous business at Snack in the Box, you wouldn't get the access to Cadbury's that he did. You wouldn't get that because he set that up with them. He's got something that you don't have. So it gives you access to things that you can't get as a standalone business. And those two things, that support structure and that supply of either service or product, normally means that a franchise business is more likely to succeed. And that's usually enough for most people.
Excellent. Great stuff. Thank you. Thanks. That's a really good insight there. Nikki, I'll just come to you with a different question. We've heard the advantages of franchising. Are there any pitfalls of buying a franchise?
I guess it's a sort of, the reverse to what Ben sort of has beautifully put out there, but ultimately it's ensuring that you have done your due diligence, you have researched, you're entering a partnership with a brand that you are passionate about. So, I guess like any venture, there are pitfalls but ultimately both parties should have, kind of researched and kind of ticked all the boxes to enable, success and a sort of successful journey. I think the most important thing is a synergy, is the partnership. So, the franchisor is there to support the franchisee. If a franchisee is failing or struggling, it's not great for the franchisor. It's our job to ensure that our network is, motivated and successful.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for that. Bal, so we've got a question about how people can go about raising finance for a franchise purchase right now.
So right now, for any new business, I think what we would be looking at is, first of all, the type of business that they're looking to go into, simply because we will be working with the government guidelines. So, depending on the business model itself and whether they're eligible to go ahead and trade, we will be working along those lines first. In terms of starting the process with us, what they would need to do is obviously do the due diligence and make sure they've got a business plan and a cash flow. Depending on the franchisee itself, we do have a lending criteria where we start off at 50%, going up to 70%. Perhaps even a little bit more for some of the brands. So it's well worth just having a conversation with us, first of all, just to understand what our criteria is in terms of lending. Once they've got their business plan and their cash flow together, they can then submit it to our franchise team directly into the unit, and we will evaluate that and then introduce them to the appropriate business manager to start the process. Okay.
Great stuff. Thanks, Bal. We've got a question on due diligence. Now, Matt, this I feel like might be your field of expertise here. So as a new franchisee, if you're advising me, what due diligence would you advise me to do when I'm looking at a brand, a franchise brand?
So first of all, you've got to look at the investment and make sure you can afford to invest in the business. And then you've got to ask yourself, is it the right business for you? So much what I said a second ago. But then when you actually start to engage with the franchisor, some of the things you need to find out from that initial meeting is everything that they've said to you and all the information that they've sent you, can it be verified? And can you speak to as many franchisees as as they will allow you to speak to, because it is a bit of a managed process. The franchisor wants to put their best foot forward to make sure that it's an appealing business for you. But equally, you want to make sure that it's not, if they've got 90 franchisees, that it's only 10 of them that's earning any money and the other 80 are struggling. So the only way you're really going to get to know that is by speaking to as many franchisees as you can. And what you find over time is that you'll start to hear a similar story. Everyone's got different circumstances, but you'll start to hear a similar story. And that's when you really get the true understanding. Like, for example, when did you start earning money? When did you break even and start earning money? Well, for some, they may come from a background of wealth and it didn't really matter. For others, they were hooked up to the eyeballs of loans and it was really important. For some, they made their money in 6 months, some might have been 12 months, some have been 18 months. So you really need to find out what it is. Is the franchisor telling lies or over-exaggerating the figures? And is it really, what are those timescales? What's the support from the franchisor really like? What's the training like? What's the relationship like between you and the franchisor? They're really important questions, because that's going to be your business going forward.
One for all of you then, before we sort of wrap up. Franchising has collaboration built into the very heart of it, because of the relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee, and that seems to extend to the industry. Now, you're all very well connected people. What are you hearing from your peers about where things are headed next, given the current circumstances? Nikki, if you'd like to start with that one.
Gosh, I don't know if I am the most well-connected person. Clearly, I think the rest of the panel are probably better so than me. But I think we're all just kind of muddling through, to be honest. I don't know that there is clear direction in terms of what's going to happen next. I think we are all, we're all adapting and, sort of re-looking at our businesses and sort of, looking at our people, looking at our expenditure, looking at our network, and the business model itself. Ultimately, what can we do to sort of ride the storm and get through the other side as intact and as healthy as possible, and just continuing to be ambitious. We are continually within Pitman and School is Easy. I mean, School is Easy, we are launching ultimately a new brand, or we have been for the last 6 months. So in some ways you could kind of think, goodness, it's a tricky time to be entering a new market with a brand. Pitman, I guess, slightly different because it has been, it's such an established brand, but ultimately just continuing to do what we do. We are still getting lots of inquiries through, lots of conversations, and just being open with our prospects. I think conversations may take longer. I'm having lots of sort of touches with people. So yeah, I guess just being patient, watching the market, looking at, still being ambitious and looking ahead, I guess, staying positive.
Lovely. That's a lovely answer. Thank you. Ben, what's the gossip you're hearing out there?
I think this, yeah. Well, do you want the gossip or the financial perspective of the future?
Let's take a bit of both.
Okay. I think any bank, any franchisor worth their salt will tell you we're heading for a fairly dramatic recession in the next 6 to 12 months. I don't think anyone's going to pretend that's not the case. However, for the ray of light to pass with the darkness is that's the time that historically franchising and startup business has its highest level of success. If you want a yardstick for that, if you go back to 2008 and look at the Lehman Brothers financial crash, the credit crunch, remember that? Credit crunch? There was a huge amount of businesses that we now consider table names that came out of that. Names like Uber, for example, were born out of the 2008 financial crisis. It's a time for people who perhaps wouldn't be thrust into self-employment are thrust into self-employment because they find themselves in a position where perhaps they've been made redundant and they have money they didn't have before, or perhaps they're in a position where they can look at working more flexibly with their employer and looking at other opportunities as well, the recessions always breed ingenuity because they have to. That's the nature of how they work. The banks know this, and that's why they're preparing for it. And Val will tell you the same, that whilst they may not be throwing money at businesses right now, and I don't think anyone is throwing money at businesses right now, they're certainly gearing up for that. And she may well correct me in a minute, but I've certainly heard comments from other financial institutions that they're preparing for it already, that they know that's going to come in 6 months or so. That there's going to be a swell in franchising and standalone business as well, startup business.
Excellent. Val, it feels logical to move on to you next after Ben's reference to you. What are you hearing out there?
Well, I would certainly say that, yes, Ben is absolutely correct. We are being very cautious. Through this situation, we are certainly supporting existing businesses at the moment. I think going forward, there will definitely be a few redundancies about, and especially with the government plans where they're furloughing, and then going forward they will obviously reduce that furlough cost, which will impact the businesses itself. So there's going to be a lot of changes. A lot of businesses have already started to diversify in terms of bringing on, looking at how differently they can actually work their models. Financially, yes, the bank will be very supportive in the franchise industry. Definitely will be, because we do feel that it will take time, possibly 6 months, possibly longer, but we're kind of thinking that it can take easily up to about a couple of years before everything does realistically resume back to normal. So I would say that we definitely will be open for business, for new business, but as and when the doors are open. Yeah.
Thank you. And Matt, your take on where we're headed?
Whenever there's uncertainty, franchise recruitment suffers. If you go back in the last 2 years, it was, are we leaving? Are we in Europe? Are we out of Europe? The Brexit thing really affected franchise recruitment in a lot of areas. And then to top it, there was the general election. And then we thought, great, it's all settling down, and everybody thought, fantastic, the whole world's on its way up, and we're it's really going to be amazing. The problem with the current situation is nobody really knows. And if franchisors are honest, they're not quite sure what their model's going to look like when you come out of COVID-19, because what was normal for the last 5 years may not be so normal in the next 5 years, or certainly the next 2 years, and therefore the model has to change, and therefore what is it you're selling, and how do you make your money, and all of those things. I think you're going to see a big use in technology going forward. So even in things like domiciliary care, where using technologies to check on people as opposed to physically going into households, making sure that people are looked after you so you can actually see them, cameras and things like that, so you know where to target your care, that kind of thing. So I think technology will play. But what's interesting, like Ben said, after a recession and after a situation where a lot of people lose their jobs or whatever, there's a big spike in franchise recruitment. So I think from a future point of view for franchising, I think the future's bright.
That's a nice thought to part on as well. That spike. Let's look forward to that. I think. Thank you all. I think we've overshot a little bit, so I appreciate everyone hanging on. I hope you found this helpful and worthwhile and worth your time. As I said, we do aim to do more of these, and any feedback is welcome.